Hey man, welcome back to Three-Peat Sports. I am your host, Ian Monhay. This is episode 18. I hope you guys are doing well, man. I'm doing pretty okay for now. I got a flight in, let's see, it's midnight right now. I have a flight in 11 hours, so I'm not going to get much sleep here tonight, but I'm going to try to pump out an episode before we head out of here because I'm not going to lie. I'm so excited to talk about this Phoenix Suns team. Not only that, like I'm still riding the high from the D-backs beating the LA Dodgers. I think you guys know how much of an open hater I am of LA teams, so I'm very happy about that. But it's also a matter of, hey, the D-backs had a really great game tonight, and they're 2 wins away from making the World Series. On top of that, the NBA season is right around the corner, and I'd figured that we would just begin talking about that. Um, Outside of that, like school is getting a little bit harder right now. There's one class that I'm really dreading. It's just straight essays. That's not fun at all. But I think we could just ignore that for a little bit and let's just talk about the Phoenix Suns now. A team that, let's just say 10 months ago, was on a completely different path than they are on right now. And let's rewind it a little bit. At the time, I think they were finalizing the ownership change. But in the meantime, they were still stuck with a suspended, cheap, and disgraced owner in Robert Sarver. And even with the negativity surrounding the ownership situation, along with, at the time, Devin Booker's groin injury and them falling down the standings, there was still stuff to be excited about with this team, spearheaded by the leadership qualities of Monty Williams and Chris Paul. This team's future was spearheaded by this quartet of Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, and Cam Johnson. And at that time, Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson were showing signs of growth on the ball, becoming more confident in their shots, and they were becoming a lot more fun to watch because they learned in the absence of Devin Booker how to create their own shots and take over games if they were able to do so. And while DeAndre Ayton, of course, was a very inconsistent player, at that time he was playing some good ball. So everything was looking pretty solid up until that point. And now we could fast forward 10 months later to now, and everything is completely changed. And it includes the 180-degree turn of ownership with Robert Sarver, who was constantly known as a very cheap owner. In comes Justin and Matt Ishbia, who have since approved massive spending ventures, which includes new facilities, expanding the front office and the organization, new uniforms, bringing in expensive contracts, expensive players. Uh, it's a large commitment to winning that we just have not seen here in the Phoenix Suns organization in such a long time. Then you go to the front office where you see the CEO, who is supposed to handle the business side of stuff, handle some of the basketball stuff, and then the general manager, James Jones, who is handling the basketball stuff, now is dealing with business stuff. And then you look at the scouting department and how that has expanded and how so many more new scouts have been added to that department. It wouldn't be possible without this new ownership change. And then you go to the coaching staff. The fun-loving staff of Monty Williams and company are no longer here, getting fired a day after the Nuggets series, or at least a couple of days after the Nuggets series, and have since been replaced by Frank Vogel. Monty Williams got himself a bag over in Detroit, and almost the entirety of that staff followed him to Detroit. And only one assistant coach remains in Phoenix from that Monty Williams staff, and it took the highest paid contract for an assistant coach in NBA history to keep him here. That coach being Kevin Young, of course. And then you look at the roster. Now, I'm not sure how many people remember this, but 10 years ago when they had Goran Dragic, Eric Bledsoe, um, I think it was Miles Plumlee that was the starting center, and the Morris twins, they tried to adopt this slogan. It was ignite the future. And to put it bluntly, that slogan did not stick with Phoenix at all. But we could apply that to now, and you know, the future is no more. The future is now. There's only one player left remaining from that 2021 NBA Finals team, that player being Devin Booker, of course. This Suns team essentially sold their soul and then some to give themselves their best chance ever at winning an NBA title, saying goodbye to the heart and soul of this team, Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, to acquire Kevin Durant. They said goodbye to Chris Paul, the man that you could arguably say spearheaded this new direction, and and more for a 30 former 30 plus point per game scorer, Bradley Beal. And then they sent off just a couple of weeks ago their only number one overall pick in franchise history, DeAndre Ayton, over to Portland in a mega deal that saw Damian Lillard go over to Milwaukee and Drew Holiday going to Boston. And I think we'll leave that discussion of Damian Lillard and Drew Holiday for a different day. But that's just a bulk of the moves that this Suns team made over the last several months that have now put them in a very vulnerable spot for criticism and a very beautiful spot for praise. And now we could go ahead and just give our first thoughts about this Suns team, especially since the preseason is over. We got a couple of games of some solid stuff from a number of NBA teams. If you were to ask me just my first thoughts about this Suns team, and I say this as unbiased as possible, they're the best offense in the NBA. And it sounds crazy to say that with, these teams in Milwaukee and Boston being created that have these sky high um, offensive potential. And I also say this with respect to teams like the Denver Nuggets, the Sacramento Kings, these all around offensive juggernauts. But I think Phoenix separates themselves with their I'll say a better collection and overabundance of the most easily translatable and most valuable skill needed to win you playoff series in a setting where the defensive physicality and intensity goes up a notch and everybody knows what plays you're running. You need guys that can improvise and play out a structure. When the shot clock is winding down and it's a busted offensive possession, you could just put the ball in the hands of somebody and they could just bail you out possession after possession because they know how to create and consistently make these difficult shots. And the fact of the matter is that they have three guys that are considered elite in that category, with Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal, of course. We're going to talk about the weaknesses of this roster. There are certainly some shortcomings with this team that we will talk about, but the surrounding core around their stars this year is exponentially much better than what the Suns surrounded their stars with last year by bringing in players that have traits that are going to be awesome for the playoffs with shooting from guys like Yuta Watanabe, Eric Gordon, Grayson Allen. You get length with Nasir Little. If you want to throw in Grayson Allen, go ahead. I'll throw in Josh Okogie, Keita Bates Diop. If you want to throw in Bol, Jordan Goodwin also. And then you also replace some of that with athleticism, with Nasir Little, with Drew Eubanks, who has been very impressive so far through the preseason. Chimezi Metu. You get some really damn good qualities from your supporting players, and then you have this pretty unorthodox hub of the offense with Yusuf Nurkic, and you have a team that is supposed to be one of the best offensive teams in the NBA, and I don't think that anybody's going to settle for anything less than that. And there's certainly going to be some reservations about the defense. There's going to be reservations about some potential holes within this roster, which includes a lack of a traditional point guard somewhere in there. But make no mistake about it, the offense for this team is and will always be the saving grace for this iteration of the Phoenix Suns. So that's my just immediate first thoughts. but that offense is going to be uh, expected to be that good because of the presence of Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal, one of the newest big threes that have been created this past offseason. And a lot of people have sort of underrated this move in some ways, at least in my opinion, and that's obviously come from a biased perspective as well. But let's just put it like this. I don't think that there should be any issues with how this three is going to work at all. Outside of like, there's a couple of question marks that come with the territory of creating a big three. Who's going to sacrifice the most for the betterment of the team? Can this group stay healthy? But outside of that, if you look at them on the court, and it shouldn't be that difficult at all for this group to gel. And I think a lot of that confidence stems from those guys' experience of playing next to multiple ball dominant guards throughout their careers, from Kyrie, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook to Chris Paul, John Wall, and I'll throw in Steph in there. All of those guys were primary ball handlers, primary initiators of their offense, which took the ball out of the hands of Book, with Beal, with Durant, who are all three awesome with the ball in their hands. They can score in isolation situations. They could score in pick and roll situations, but that being in those situations forced them to learn how to, in a cliche, corny way, be a better teammate. But it's also adapting to the situation and having to develop an off-ball game, and that's not just from a floor spacing, stationary perspective, but from a movement one. These guys learned how to do multiple things off the ball that include posting up and running a number of pat plays, coming off of pin downs, curls, um, flares, flashes to the middle, back cuts, coming off of dribble handoffs, being pick setters, you name it. And learning how to develop that skill, it led to some of the best offensive seasons of these guys' careers, from MVPs, finals MVPs, and finals appearances to 30 plus point per game seasons, all star seasons, and all NBA teams. These guys learned how to dominate the game without having to dominate the ball, like how a James Harden would, a Luka Doncic would. And because of that, it gives me this overwhelming amount of confidence that these three can all be on the floor together, and nothing's going to be awkward between those three, because those three understand the importance of playing within the flow of an offense. Sure, they might be high maintenance in the sense that, yeah, they are going to need the ball in their hands because they are just that elite of scorers, but they are not high maintenance in the manners in which they score. And I think having that sort of versatility, you can't have enough of at all. I don't think that there is such thing as having that type of redundancy with this team. They are gonna be one of the best offensive teams in the league, and it's gonna be spearheaded by this trio that uh, we have high expectations for, and rightfully so. This is gonna be a very damn good offensive trio that I really don't think anybody is ready for. This type of selflessness, this type of versatility, you just don't see that in many big threes at all. You always have a guy that's going to be a little bit of an outlier compared to the other two, whether that's a guy that's a big man and is going to have to adjust to being a little bit more of a pick and pop guy, or maybe you have, again, like a James Harden type who is so comfortable at dominating the ball that have these disgraceful off-ball games. I don't see the problem in that at all with this three. And I don't think that, Bradley Beal may be the only wishy-washy defender of the group, but they are positive defenders. They are elite bucket getters from anywhere on the court that can dominate anywhere on the court, and they are pretty solid playmakers for what it's worth, given that they are not natural point guards at all. I think that they are going to hold up just fine, and there should be no reservations about this three. Dude, you have no idea how fucking excited I am for this big three at all. But make no mistake about it. Health aside, obviously, this is going to be one of maybe the best trio in the league. and I don't think that's a stretch of me to say that. All right, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's been how many months now since I've recorded a podcast or done radio? It's it really does a number on the vocal cords. English is tough, man. Oh, sorry. Um, I think we'll talk about the rest of the. No, we're gonna talk about the trade. I think we can't avoid talking about this trade at all. Because again, it really does alter everything around the NBA with that Giannis and Dame pick and roll, where we're talking about um, this new six player group of Derek White, Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, Drew Holiday, Porzingis, Al Horford. That's really deadly. And the Phoenix Suns helped facilitate that trade by sending away their only number one overall pick in franchise history for a group of four players that we are going to talk about in depth. But to give my overall thoughts about trading away DeAndre Ayton, a guy that I have continuously um, instilled belief in over the last several years, even with his inconsistencies. Um, I will say this: like it definitely was time to let him go, get him a fresh start, but it was also needed for the Phoenix Suns to get this fresh start, knowing that he was always going to be a topic of discussion, knowing whether that was the max contract, whether that was his high maintenance offensive demands. It really feels like I was very much in denial of there ever being any tension in there, even though I think we all knew deep down that something was fundamentally amiss with that squad. And I think it was just the right time for it all. Now, the return for Phoenix, I mean, let's talk about it. I do have quite a bit of issues, and it also carries over into what we saw in the preseason. And that starts and ends with Yusuf Nurkic, a guy that has the offensive qualities that the Suns have continuously talked about and we have continuously seen throughout these preseason games where you'll get some wishy-washy floor spacing ability. You're not going to get the greatest finisher at the basket at all. DeAndre Ayton's very superior in that. But you have a guy that has amazing feel on the offensive end. You have a guy that is one of the better passers at the center position, knowing when a guy is going to back cut, or maybe a guy that's just going to cut to the basket in general, that can play within the flow of an offense as well. You see that quality of his, and you think that's going to be a very dangerous part about this offense. It's him being one of the best illegal pick setters in the NBA. You have you see the logic of trying to get in a guy that has that type of offensive versatility that can certainly not necessarily be high maintenance, but um, be of benefit for this big three. Now, a lot of those issues stem from the defensive end, and that's where my issue is going to be um, very glaring to say the least. In a Frank Vogel defense, the center position is the most important position, and I think that's logical for any NBA fan. But I go ahead and I look at this Frank Vogel defense, and I look at the center's responsibilities of not necessarily just being a rim protector, but it requires the center to be way more of a vocal leader, having to call out the other team's plays, being the most court aware player on the court at all times. You got to have the not necessarily quick twitch athleticism, but you have to have sufficient athleticism in order for Frank Vogel to go ahead and implement multiple defensive schemes. Oof, that was close. Um, and with a guy in Yusuf Nurkic that has notoriously bad foot speed, it really puts the Suns in a mismatch where they have to run this sort of pseudo drop defense where they have um, on a pick and roll, they would have the big man come up hard and play high in pick and roll coverage, but then immediately backpedal a little bit immediately upon the blitz so that he has time to alter the pass and make the pass difficult. It's what Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets do on defense. And we've seen it work in spurts over here in the preseason, and we've seen it um, really be taken advantage of, particularly in this Lakers game, which it wasn't bad defense by any means, but it wasn't good. It was very glaring that uh, there's going to be times within the season where he's going to get into foul trouble really easily because he doesn't have the necessary foot speed or the coordination with his body to play straight up defense at all. And given that he's going to have to take on not only the Embiids, the Jokic's, and the who else am I thinking of? Anthony Davis's, but we're also thinking about potentially the Giannis's and how they're going to have to match up. And it's just a complete mismatch that I'm not very comfortable with because of how important the center position is in this scheme. I can't I can't afford to have a center here that can't live up to the defensive potential that Frank Vogel has as a coach and what this defensive ceiling might become. Now, granted, it hasn't been bad as from a team perspective. They can all guard out on the perimeter, but I would definitely like some rim protection. That is all. And then you get to I'll say like the main root for me not liking this trade. It all stems from my own personal threshold of what needed to be met for me to trade away DeAndre Ayton. Now, obviously, the value is what it is, and it resulted in uh, an often injury-prone, expensive, and flawed center in Yusuf Nurkic as the centerpiece. That's ultimately what the value was and has been for quite some time, and they couldn't find anything else. And they wanted to offload him, and it makes sense that they traded him. But my own personal threshold was to acquire two playable playoff players and have those guys be more of sure things than anything else. And I look at this package of Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Nasir Little, and Keon Johnson. I'm thinking we might only have one. Grayson Allen has been awesome in this preseason so far, looking like he's probably going to be one of the in that top 7 in the rotation. But I also look at his size, how he is a lighter guard, a shorter guard, and that he might be a little bit more matchup dependent in the playoffs unless he just becomes this really damn good shooter. Outside of him, like I don't view Nurk as a viable playoff option, really, considering what needs to be done in order for this team to win a championship and a Frank Vogel team to win a championship. I don't think that Nurk can be that. Nasir Little is a little bit iffy too, but it really requires him to not only be a above average shooter or an average shooter, but it also requires him to stay healthy. A guy that hasn't played more than 55 games in a regular season at all throughout his NBA career, and he's been in the league for, I believe this is his 5th season now. And considering the amount of short, this team has guys that are not really sure things in the rotation at all. We like what we have seen from guys like Yuta Watanabe, Chimezi Metu, certainly Grayson Allen, Eric Gordon, but a lot of these guys are prove-it players for what it's worth. You have guys like I think they're going to bring back Ish Wainwright. He got cut, but I think he'll be back on a 2-way. You have guys like Ish Wainwright, Metu, Watanabe, Damian Lee, Josh Okogie, guys that were all on playoff teams last year, but they all had a fatal flaw within their games that made them unplayable on their playoff teams last year. Then you have guys like Keita Bates-Diop, Drew Eubanks. Who else could we throw in there in that trade? Nasir Little, guys that have projected good skill sets for good teams, but have been on bad teams throughout their NBA careers, and we don't know if that's going to translate. You have a guy in Eric Gordon uh, that is aging a little bit, and while we have seen signs that he could continue this play, this sufficient play that would make him a potential six man of the year candidate, it doesn't really, it's no guarantee that we get that same player throughout the course of an 82 game regular season, let alone the playoffs. Then you go over to guys that are going to be the swing factors, like Yuta Watanabe, Keita Bates-Diop, these guys that had great years last year, but those are, compared to the rest of their careers, one-offs, and they have to prove their value this year that whatever they did last year wasn't a fluke. There really isn't any sure things on this roster outside of an Eric Gordon, and if you want to throw in an a Grayson Allen, you could do that too. But because there is so much uncertainty with how a lot of these guys are going to perform, I definitely would have preferred to get a package of players that we all knew that could be viable in a playoff rotation, and this wasn't that. But that's a little bit more so of an indictment on the value of DeAndre Ayton than my own wishes, right? That's my ultimate um, thoughts about the deal. But they all really contribute and balance out this team in a very nice way. And I think that's where we'll talk about the preseason a little bit, where they went 4-1. I think the only game that they lost to was against Denver, and they didn't play all of their guys. I don't. I heard this phrase from this podcast that I listened to called the Timeline, and the word was instead of copium, it was hopium. I don't want to provide a whole ton of hope of when it comes to some of these players, because at the end of the day, this is only 5 preseason games. It's nothing compared to the regular season, let alone the playoffs. But to put it lightly, everything that we have talked about with this Phoenix Suns team and their potential, it has really showed up in the preseason so far. The big three is as good as advertised and better. Devin Booker's 3-point shot looks very, very legit, and it always has been solid, right? This is a guy that's won a 3-point contest before, but has been a guy that very much preferred the mid range and is a guy that ultimately he's only shot 35, 36% from downtown, only maybe a couple of times. Has always been around this average to slightly above average 3-point shooter in game, and that has um, thrown a lot of us off whenever we look at those stats. But he has made it a point to take more pull-up 3-point jump shots, and he has attempted, I believe the stat was 10.2 3-point attempts per 36 minutes, and that's courtesy of the Timeline podcast. They do a really good job with keeping up with the Sun stuff. But it's a very clear point of emphasis that it would really top off his game, considering that he's still shooting at these insane percentages, this insane efficiency of scoring anywhere and everywhere on the court. And a lot of that was being able to dominate inside the arc, in the mid range, being able to attack the basket at will, and bullying his way to the basket. And Book has always been a solid 3-point shooter, but we have not seen him shoot at this type of volume where you're seeing uh, Steph shooting numbers. You're seeing Damian Lillard shooting numbers. Um, Jordan Poole shooting numbers, if you wanted to do that. Klay Thompson a couple of years ago. It's if that 3-point shooting really does translate over into the season, I mean, you better hope that it's not legit, just to put it bluntly, because this is still the same performances. This type of level of play that we're seeing is still that Michael Jordan-esque comparison that they had to in last year's playoffs. This is stuff that we have never seen from Devin Booker before in terms of being this excellent shooter from beyond the arc. If that's added, he he would have taken a next step in his play, and that's just really remarkable considering how damn good of a player he is already without being this high volume 3-point shooter. Now, there was a couple of surprises, but just to get a couple of them out of the way, like Keon Johnson was very much a throw-in. Bol Bol hasn't really done much for me to think, oh, he could eventually be a viable playoff player. He's certainly a guy that you would put in, when you're up 30, you're down 30, or if there's like 30 seconds left. I remember I forgot who I saw um that phrase from, but I know that I saw it on Twitter. And it's a perfect way to describe it, and I think that he's going to continue to be that moving forward. I don't think that there is a viable playoff playoff rotation spot, regular season rotation spot. He's not going to be a main guy for this team at all. Um, I would say my biggest surprise, I think a lot of it, the consensus is Chimezi Metu throughout the Suns fan base. Everybody's very delighted by how Metu has played as a 6'9" player that was with Sacramento last year that always had this weird in between where he was a little bit too not he was not a very good shooter over the last several years, and it didn't really make him a viable four option. And because of how much of a lightweight he is as a small ball center, it made him a very much a liability there too. He was left without an identity for a little bit, and it's no guarantee that what we're seeing right now from him is going to be what we'll see in the regular season. But to put it lightly, it has been a pleasant surprise to see him shoot 47, 48% from downtown on, I think it was 17 attempts throughout these 5 games. He has looked like a legit floor spacer so far. And if that is a added element to his game, he might insert himself into the rotation. This is a 6'9" player with some very legit um, not necessarily shooting chops, but his form is really, really nice. There is good spin on it. It is not it doesn't look like it's anything awkward at all. It comes off real smoothly like how any wings would. And he has the really damn good length that will make him a legit defensive piece when he's utilized on the perimeter. And that has been shown in the preseason as well. This is a guy that a lot of Kings fans have tried to tell us is, not very good, is probably not going to crack your rotation. And he might not. We might not see this level of play from him in the regular season. We don't know if that's going to be viable in the playoffs. But again, this is a guy that, for a team that doesn't have very many sure things, the Suns need players that are going to develop real quickly and can insert themselves into these types of conversations. And Metu is certainly a potential guy there that, dude, if that 3-point shooting is legit, I would seriously consider him in the starting lineup and have KD move over to the three and, have him not deal with these bruising 4s and 5s all the time. I think that would be ideal. But again, that's a stretch of hope, right? But Metu has been the biggest surprise among the Suns fan base, including myself. But Drew Eubanks, I didn't know that he had this this much in his game, even with the amount of content that I had consumed over the last several months of so many of these Suns players. To me, Eubanks was always a guy that I think not necessarily was a cone offensively, but was mainly a guy that is going to rely on these finesse finishes, a guy that's going to do these DeAndre Ayton push shots, maybe 10, 15 feet away. Maybe is a guy that is a athletic finisher in spurts, right? But is mainly going to be a pick setter and is probably going to be a guy that you throw a lob a couple of times to, and that would be it. Now, he hasn't really elevated his offensive skill set. He's not the biggest floor spacer by any means, but is a guy that has shown to be really solid with these finesse finishes, and he is a legit highlight reel in the making. He's sneaky athletic for being 6'8" and only having this average wingspan. I think it's only like a 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" wingspan that he has as a smaller center. And he is looking very legit as a guy that is going to be an aggressive finisher whenever he gets a couple of feet within the basket and is going to try to bang on you. Um, and then you go to the defensive side, and he is a guy that is extremely fearless. And I think that was what the Suns tried to do with so many of these these minimum signings. Not just guys that are fearless, but guys that are going to be willing to do the dirty work in order for this team to succeed. And Eubanks, I don't remember a couple of times where he has dove on the floor, but is a guy that has legit contests on every shot that I've seen on him so far, and is a guy that is going to jump and elevate with you if you try to dunk over him and if you try to finish over him. He tries to do everything defensively, and I can appreciate that. He has the athletic chops to be semi okay on the perimeter. Like, I don't expect him to have that type of role, but he could be serviceable in spurts. He can be a guy that's going to protect the rim pretty well. I'm very excited about this with Eubanks, as well as his passing. I think that with the second unit, it's been very surprising to see how well he has been as a guy that's going to be that's adapting a little bit more into that Nurkic role where you have a better feel of the game. He is able to hit backdoor cuts with ease. Is a guy that's going to be really good at being pick setter and helping out Bradley Beal and Book come off of dribble handoffs. Just having multiple guys that can do that for an offense, it's going to be really valuable. And the way that I described it on Twitter was, I think that based off of what we've seen in preseason, Eubanks provides the stuff that Nurk does offensively, but is also a guy that has some solid defensive chops. And that might just be enough to win him a starting spot at some point. Again, a lot of hopium with this roster, with this conversation, but this is the first impressions that we're getting, and these are some really damn good first impressions of a team that not only was really, really promising on both ends, but dominant on both ends, as crazy as it sounds. So I'm not going to rule anything out, but Eubanks has been awesome to me, along with Yuta Watanabe, a guy that was brought over from Brooklyn. He pretty much came over here because of his relationship with Kevin Durant. They both played in Brooklyn for a little bit last year. His shooting is looking really good. Like everything that we are seeing from a corner 3-point shooting perspective, which, if you guys don't know, they shot 9 of 50 on all corner 3-point shots in the Denver series last year. And a lot of them were as a result of just leaving Landry Shamet open, leaving Josh Okogie open. And that's not good and viable ball, right? And bringing Yuta Watanabe, who was a 50% corner 3-point shooter last year, it seems like it's translating over really well. Not necessarily at that percentage, but is really making those corner 3-point shots at a really efficient level. He has been really damn good coming off of dribble handoffs as well, as a guy that can take a handoff and maybe take 2 dribbles in and create himself a mid-range jumper that has looked always really, really solid. I think offensively he's going to be a very legit weapon. He really plays off of stars nicely because he knows his role. It is sacrificing for the betterment of the team, being a little bit more of a catch and shoot guy and a very spotty, in spurts. He'll come off of dribble handoffs and create a shot in the mid range or try to facilitate. Defensively, it's not necessarily ideal. He's definitely a little bit lighter as a wing, but he is certainly a very serviceable guy that is going to play some pretty significant minutes for the first time in his career here in Phoenix. Now, a lot of these guys that we are seeing, not only from them, but from Grayson Allen, from Eric Gordon, it's everything as advertised. Jordan Goodwin has been a defensive menace, and I think I'm going to just leave that there. I think you look up some Jordan Goodwin defensive film, and you can see exactly why Phoenix really wanted this guy in the Bradley Beal trade, and that it's why it's such a steal. Plus, I think everybody's going to go over it before me. So, um, I'm trying to get this up as quick as possible before I head to my flight. But Jordan Goodwin has looked awesome, as good as advertised. Same with Watanabe. You got some good surprises with Eubanks and Metu. You have some disappointments here and there, like Keita Bates Diop isn't so far isn't what I'm hoping. Nasir Little is taking a little bit to get his feet wet here in Phoenix. But I think we could talk about the rest of the roster. You have that fifth starter spot is still in flux, but you feel very confident with even with Josh Okogie in there, who with this group of stars where there is really only it's only him that's a floor spacing negative, which I think is what made him stick out like a sore thumb last year in the playoffs because he was playing next to a guy in Chris Paul who, let's be honest, like he could shoot it from time to time, but in the playoffs he was not shooting it well really at all and was not willing to take those shots, and neither was Josh Okogie going to as well. And then DeAndre Ayton was not going to, and it really left Okogie in a really bad spot. I think that with this group that is all it's a full group of floor spacers that is going to really help out Josh Okogie, not only from just that shooting perspective in the sense that he doesn't have to shoot as many as he had to last year, but he can legitimately cut and has been able to back cut or flash to the middle multiple times now. And I'm starting to see that synergy between him and Nurk that will make him a very dangerous threat in the starting lineup. And is a guy that's going to eat up some defensive minutes on guys like Steph Curry and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Damian Lillard. Like, I'm not opposed to Josh Okogie as much as I was previously. I was previously on Watanabe. It wouldn't be bad if they started Watanabe, but I can certainly see how valuable a guy like Okogie can be in this starting lineup. Grayson Allen and Eric Gordon, you can certainly see their shooting chops and how well that could balance off of the starting lineup as well. Like I think those three would be awesome within that role, that fifth starter role. Either way, I'd be very happy. So I don't view that as much of a question mark. As we sort of look through the rest of the roster, like, yes, I would have loved some more rim protection outside of Drew Eubanks. Like, we're not going to get that from Bol Bol. As good as Metu has been, I don't really expect him to be a rim protector much at all. And Nurk, I'm not going to rely on him for that either. So it would be nice if we got maybe one more legit rim protector, let's just say Bismack Biyombo, and bring him back as the third stringer. Maybe you end up making trade, and I think you have the rim protection issues with this team. You have the lack of a traditional backup point guard, an experienced one at that. You could certainly see in spurts how this could not necessarily go wrong, but you could see the warts that this team had when there was no Durant, Book, and Beal, which is not always going to happen. But you saw how disorganized the team looked once those three went out, and it would be nice. I could see why they were interested and are still interested in a guy like T.J. McConnell. But I'm comforted knowing that they have these avenues for improvements. Like, yeah, we're only a couple of days away from the start of the season now. Only, wow, 3 days till the start of the season. But I am comfortable with this roster right now, and I think a lot of it stems from the contracts of Nasir Little and Grayson Allen and Yusuf Nurkic. If they wanted to make another trade with any of those contracts, they can. And they're able to incentivize teams with more second round picks. They traded away 6 seconds for Bradley Beal, and they essentially got back their 6 seconds by making multiple pick swap deals. And I think that was just a shrewd move by this front office, knowing that they're going to have to try to make some improvements somewhere on this roster. And they also have small, albeit, it's small exceptions, but they have trade exceptions nonetheless, where they could just absorb a salary of, I think, around 6.5 million. And that leaves the door open for bringing in guys like potentially veteran options like Otto Porter. If Ricky Rubio ever became available, that would be nice. Or you could go after like a young reject and hope that they could go ahead and be contributors to this rotation. We're talking guys like Najee Marshall, Kira Lewis Jr. If you wanted to go for a little bit of stretches like Poku or Trey Mann, I was going to say Peyton Pritchard, but he just got himself a contract, so that might not work out. But you get the point. Like they have avenues for improvement, and they have salaries to fill in. They have trade exceptions that can be used to absorb contracts, and they have second round picks to incentivize teams with. I really think that there's uh, a lot of hope here. That if let's just say a Keita Bates Diop doesn't work out, or maybe Metu isn't playing to the level that he was in the preseason, you have these options to go ahead and improve the roster. A team that is already considered one of the best in the NBA now is going to be uh, now have these options and these avenues, and it's going to be really fascinating to see all of this working out with when it comes to their roster and their roster changes. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see if they end up making any more additions because man, it feels like more is on the way. Like it's just been trade after trade after trade over the last 10 months or so. It's been very different. So it feels like that's an expectation now. All right, hopefully one more drink. All right. So we went over the roster, we went over the little weaknesses, we went over the big 3. Um do I want to give a bold predict? I'll give a bold prediction. I do think Book ends up in the top 3 of MVP voting. It's not really too much of a stretch to say that right now, but you look at the 3-point shooting and how it looks like everything that he has done in last year's playoffs is going to carry over. You combine that with he has improved vision. He's getting more opportunities somehow with this uh, with this group, even with Durant and Bradley Beal. You consider the defensive improvements over the last several years. You consider his overall shot making and how he's going to be a little bit more ball dominant now that he is the starting point guard of this team. I could certainly see a world where he averages close to 30. I could really see a season where he averages 30 points now with this group. Now let's just say he averages like 34 and 7 assists on we'll say like 48, 37, 88 splits. That might get him an MVP, man. Like that could get him very dangerously close to an MVP award, and it would really be just it would be like the a real peak when it comes to Suns fandom. This is a guy that 9 years ago was drafted to this dysfunctional organization that had no idea how to build a functional roster at all, let alone a functional roster around him, and had these opportunities to leave, right? Leave this bad situation that was going to derail him of these really high praises and high notices. And now, over the last several years, he has been surrounded by this really damn elite talent that has led him to first team All NBA, multiple All Star teams, an NBA Finals appearance, and ultimately his performances and that type of play and his personality has lured over Kevin Durant and has lured over Bradley Beal. And you saw when Durant came, we all expected Book stats to go down. Instead, everything we're talking points per game, we're talking assists, we're talking overall efficiency. That all increased once Durant came, and that wasn't the expectation at all. This is his team, and he's going to be the guy that's going to dominate the ball a little bit more than we're used to seeing, and that could very much result in this close to MVP caliber season that is going to it might catch some people off guard considering the amount of uh, hatred is strong. We'll just say the dislikings, the constant dislikings of of Devin Booker by the media, by NBA fans in general. I think that he's going to be really, really good this season, really elite to the point where I think he could definitely push top 5 player discussions, and I think we'll finish in the top 3 in MVP voting. Now, I refrained from giving any sort of season predictions or anything like that because I mean, fuck, we're 3 days away from the regular season. Like nothing has been set in stone at all. So we're gonna leave those out for a little bit. But just know that this is a team that's going to be very provocative. This is a team that's going to bring out the strongest takes from anybody and everybody that is involved in the NBA community, whether that's us as fans, content creators, journalists, uh, commentators. You're going to see a lot of strong takes from this team no matter what happens this season. And I guess my only piece of advice for Suns fans would just be to enjoy this ride. Like for me in particular, I've been a fan for 13 years now. I became a fan in their last playoff series ever for 10 years. And my first playoff series experience, my first legit playoff run ended in an NBA Finals appearance. But before that, it was multiple 50 lost seasons after 50 lost seasons, complete dysfunction. You saw a ton of drama. To think that as a fan, I see all of this dysfunction in and out of the organization. And I look at it now, and somehow they have lured over out like my second favorite player of all time with Durant, a top 20, 25 player in NBA history. You were able to lure one of the 5 best point guards ever in NBA history in Chris Paul. You were able to lure over a multi-time 30-point per game scorer in Bradley Beal. It's nothing that even like 3 years ago, I would have never imagined having a team like this ever with this type of talent. A team that is going to make some noise, that's going to be provocative, and it's just going to be really fun to enjoy. I think everybody's already preparing for that joy, that excitement, and I'm right there with them. There's high expectations. I have high expectations, and I'm sure that I'm going to talk about this more and more throughout the season. But let's just say, consider this a warning. um, and I think, yeah, it's 1 o'clock. I wake up in 5 hours. I think we're gonna end this real soon here. I appreciate you guys for listening. I know it's been a couple of months. I know that you guys have been waiting for that coveted line that I'll say after I come back from a couple of months break. But it really does feel good to be back. I think a lot of this excitement is really going to carry over throughout future episodes. I do have I don't want to give too much spoiler, but I did get invited on to a podcast in particular, and I think we're going to talk NBA ball, and I'm going to be on there. I'm going to be very excited for that. So, um, NBA season's right around the corner. I'm going to do my best to put out as much content as I can throughout this season, and um, I appreciate you guys for listening to this first episode back. Um, let's see. Saturday, I'm going to be back Monday night. I'm going to try to get something out by Wednesday. Maybe we talk about the opening night slate of games. Who knows? Maybe we just give on a full NBA preview for this season. But that's all that I have for today. I appreciate you guys for listening. Um, I'll see you guys in the next episode. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you soon.